So, what does pride or embarrassment like really gain you? I mean, you might as well just go for it because you honestly have nothing to lose by at least trying. So for me, this is something I've sort of taken into like all aspects of my life, and where it comes into like full force here is saying to myself, well, if I don't go and try, I'll just be sitting in my cushy job and enjoying all these benefits. If I try, my best case scenario is I can go and be a billionaire or make a couple $1,000,000, whatever it may be.
Welcome to Creativity Boost Podcast. Today it's a pleasure to have on the show a founder and a CEO of Gatsby TV. He goes by the name Gatsby Frimpong. And today we're going to be discussing how to create a profitable solution from a problem. Hi Gatsby, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good. There's no better person to talk about this topic today because your journey simply epitomizes all of this. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself as we kick this conversation up?
Yeah, no problem at all. So my name is Gatsby Frimpong. I am an engineer, designer, and a lot of other different things. My formal education was actually in economics, but didn't really like banking, more so like technology. So I got into the technology space, and I've been working in technology ever since graduating from undergrad. Recently, or somewhat recently, I decided to start my own company. It's called the Gatsby app or Gatsby TV app. It's an app that streams all of your various streaming video on demand platforms all in one place, and it allows you to send recommendations to friends and family members.
Wow, that's an amazing one. I didn't even know that you had an economics background, but we can talk about that later. But can you tell us what inspired you to birth the brainchild that you call Gatsby TV app?
Yeah, so I was actually thinking last night, entrepreneurship is a pretty difficult thing because you get a lot of mostly lows, honestly. It's a very interesting thing to get into. I'd caution anyone who wants to get into it to think about where they want to be mentally. But with that being said, where essentially the inspiration came from was it was a personal problem that I got really passionate about. I had a lot of time that I would spend with my partner at the time, and we would spend a lot of time watching TV, whether it be movies, TV shows, etc. And I felt that we were watching far too many bad TV shows and movies, and that it was wasting a lot of my time. I'm essentially always been a very busy person. So when I sit down to relax, I want to feel satisfied after. I want to feel like I've watched something that either made me think or made me laugh. And I felt like that wasn't happening nearly enough. And so I said to myself, okay, what is it that makes it so hard to find something that makes me think or laugh? Because there's just so many TV shows and movies out there. And so it became sort of like a research project, reading about it. Then it turned into, okay, maybe I can come up with a deck with some sort of solutions. Then the deck kind of turned into, okay, I want to build a product. And then from building a product, it said, okay, maybe you can create a business around this.
Yeah, wow, that's super exciting. So you had a personal problem and you commercialized it. You turned a personal problem into a global solution because you figured that other people would potentially be having that same problem. And I think that is really phenomenal. In fact, that is creativity at best. Another thing that fascinates me about your story is the name Gatsby. In fact, when I came across the name, I never fathomed that would be your first name or your surname or whatever name that was. So I really feel, captivated by your story. So can you tell us like what the journey was like when you conceived that idea? How many years did it take you to get it off the ground? I know many founders, usually have that drawback. They have a challenge getting that idea out. They spend lots of time. It could be months, it could be years, it could be decades trying to convince themselves that it's worth the hassle. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, so for me, this was a journey of many years. It's been about 3 years, going from ideation to creation to execution, and then where we are today. And I think for me, the thing I think about when it comes to entrepreneurship is I think that within the media, whether it be American media or global media, there always seems to be an emphasis on those who did it easy. I'm sure that, or quickly, I should say, where you hear these stories of, it was just an idea, and then 9 months later it was worth $100 million, or this person was only 19 when they did it. And I just want to make sure that anyone who's listening to this, if you're working on something and it's been years and you're maybe old or whatever it may be, the reason why we always hear of these like Mark Zuckerbergs and Bill Gates and all these other people is because it's really abnormal actually to do something that quickly or to do something that young, etc. And so if you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm 30 something, 40 something, or it's taking me 7 years, it's taking 10 years, blah, blah, you're actually following the typical path of actually a very successful founder. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And I try to actually sort of ground myself in that sort of knowledge too, because like I said before on the podcast, when you're an entrepreneur, the other part about it that they don't tell you is that the reason why all these successes are talked about is because, to be quite honest, most things are failures, most things that people get into. And just because your product doesn't end up finding product market fit, or it doesn't do well, or it doesn't become $1 billion company, it doesn't mean that you as a person are a failure. Right. That's another thing. It's like your company isn't a reflection of you as a person. And so, again, something I try to ground myself in quite a bit because I have bad days, quite a lot, actually. A lot of things don't go my way.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. But one thing, and, in the wisdom of Instagram memes and images, one thing I saw the other day that I thought was interesting was essentially, the image was like an image of Michael Jordan, and there's a caption on top of it. And it said, I know that I'm going in the right direction because things stop becoming easy. So yeah, just sort of keeping it in mind, like the more you stretch, the larger your goals, etc. Actually, the harder things become, the more or less likely things become. But again, any failures that you have along the way, and even ultimate failure, isn't a reflection of you as a person. It's just a reflection of what's kind of going on in the business. So yeah.
Wow, that's such a profound response. Now, let me bring you back a bit, because I understand that you actually are an engineer, or you became an engineer in your journey, so you actually knew how to write code. So do you think that was what probably spurred you on to tackle that problem head on? Because there are many people who would say, oh, maybe if I was a tech guy, maybe I would have been able to solve this particular problem I'm having. So do you think there's also an opportunity for people who are not necessarily tech savvy like you are to solve problems using technical solutions?
Yeah, so I think that right now is, and not to be cliche, but I think that this is probably one of the most interesting times to have ever been alive. More recently, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about AI and ChatGPT, and even as someone who's got a technical background, I go into ChatGPT quite a bit, and now it's gotten to a point where I feel as if Google search is absolutely useless to me. I wonder how even people were finding information, getting things done with just Google search before. I think that one thing that's drastically different about my situation, I was talking to someone the other day about this, is I'm currently in graduate school. And one thing about a lot of technologies or things that end up becoming big in the world is that usually a lot of students are kind of using it, or young people are using it, right? And I was kind of thinking about, like, why is this the case that a lot of times the technologies that end up catching fire end up being used by students or young people first, and then they proliferate into the broader economy. And the thing I was sort of thinking is, like, as a student, right, I think what's different about being a student versus a professional is that maybe you got 4 or 5 classes a semester. And for some of these subjects, this is the first time you're ever seeing this information. Again, you're a student, you're learning things. And so you start to come up with a lot of very ingenious ways to sort of learn things quickly or get things done, right? And because, you're trying to get a good grade, you're trying to have less stress in your life. And so one thing that I've seen, and one thing that I've sort of started to use quite a bit, is ChatGPT, because I'm like, man, yeah, I don't have this concept, or I have this thing due tomorrow, and like, what's the quickest way I can get this thing done? And I find myself, rather than looking at a textbook or looking at Google or Wikipedia, going back to ChatGPT to get that information quickly. So with that being said, the reason why I say this is one of the most interesting times to be alive, if not the most interesting, is that, going back to your original question, before, if you weren't a software engineer, then you trying to build a technical product is going to be pretty difficult, right? But with ChatGPT, what's strange, or what's interesting, I should say, about it is you could say, hey, I'm looking to make a web page that has this, this, and this. I want these images. I want it to be centered in this way. And I want it to have this text that I've written out in Microsoft Word. It can generate the entire website for you. which is insane, right? So just
Yeah.
this sort of curve that was needed before, where you're going to have to be a technical engineer and know how to do this and how to do that. Right now, the only thing that's your barrier is, are you able to type? Because you don't even have to type this stuff in English. You can type it in those if you type it in Spanish, if you type it in French, if you type it in the various African languages, Asian languages, whatever, it can still translate that. And then again, even translate it from some foreign language into English for your web page, and then have all those images. And then again, you don't even have to generate the images. You could ask, or you don't even have to come up with your own images. You could ask it to generate images for you, which is wild, in the style of Van Gogh, in the style of, X famous designer. It's absolutely insane. And so what I would say to someone today, if you're saying, I can't really, I don't really have the engineering skills, maybe what I'd say is go on Code Academy. It's $15 a month roughly. Take some of the beginner classes they have, so you have some sort of familiarity, and then just go into ChatGPT and start asking it questions. And I think you'd be shocked what you can come up with today, given the way that you can interface with ChatGPT and AI and get things done.
Wow. So in a nutshell, you can learn whatever you need to get your ideas off the ground, and that's where developing that skill comes. And it doesn't take time as it used to take many years ago, when you needed to filter through heavy textbooks in the library or go through different pages of Google search. Now you can do that with just a prompt on ChatGPT and even Meta AI, so there's lots of opportunities. And let's say ultimately, let's say you hate the technical mess of going through technical code and whatnot, you can hire people, or you can partner with someone who has the time, or who has the bandwidth, or the mental bandwidth for that. So don't sleep on your ideas, don't bury your dreams, don't abort your brain children because you feel like you lack technical skills to make them happen. That's for those who are in the technical path, or whose solution align with going the technical route. Now, having said that, I have another question for you, Gatsby. What were the biggest challenges you faced when you try to create a solution for this problem? And I want you to handle this question from two angles: from the internal conflict, the internal challenges you faced, and then the external challenges you faced, if there were any at all.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll start with the former, which is the internal challenges. So for me, the thing is, as a skilled person in the United States, I have the opportunity to make quite a lot of money being a computer engineer, especially for someone who's very young and didn't come from much. And so when I talk about internal challenges, there's this opportunity cost, right? If you decide you're going to strike out on your own and you're going to go start your own business, what you're actually competing against is the fact that you could sit in a very cushy job at one of the big tech companies, making couple $100,000 a year, getting free massages, getting free food, all these various things. It's very hard to walk away from that, right? Because we're not talking small sums of money. Again, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars with stock options, with 401k, with healthcare. And like I said, you're getting free food. I mean, they really do a good job of taking care of their employees. But the one thing that I will say is, when you think, okay, I'm making a couple $100,000 a year, they're feeding me, they're doing all these things, they're doing that because the value you bring to the business is worth more than they're giving you, right? I mean, they're
10 times or more.
Exactly. So think to yourself, well, I don't know. Yeah, let's use your number 10 times. If I'm making $300,000 at this job, that means I'm worth $3 million. And rather than giving that $2.7 million to, name big tech company, whoever it is, maybe I could get that for myself. Right. And I think for myself, and it would take you 10 years to do it at that company, whereas maybe it'll take you just a few years if you're really lucky, if you're doing it for yourself. So that's what you really compete against. It's really sort of like, okay, this trade-off of, do I want to forego a really high salary and all this job security for maybe striking out on my own and failing? And for me, really what it kind of came down to is, there's this book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I think is a great book. And there's a chapter that has always resonated with me ever since I read it. And essentially what the chapter says is that rejection is a myth. And so what it means by that is, let's say, for instance, you're at a bar and there's a good looking person that you want to talk to. And a lot of times people are really nervous about it, right? They don't want to go up to the person because they fear being rejected or being embarrassed, whatever it may be. And basically the way that this sort of concept goes is, okay, if you don't go up to this person, right, you're just going to be there and you're going to be single or alone, right? But if you go up to the person, one of two things are going to happen. Either they're going to respond in kind and maybe you'll get yourself your first date and maybe even a future partner, if not being married. Or your worst case scenario is they're going to say, no, not interested, and walk off somewhere else. But that worst case scenario is actually the scenario you're in right now. So to be quite honest,
you're already there.
Exactly. You're already alone and without the person, and I haven't talked to the person. So, what does pride or embarrassment like really gain you? I mean, you might as well just go for it because you honestly have nothing to lose by at least trying. So for me, this is something I've sort of taken into like all aspects of my life, and where it comes into like full force here is saying to myself, well, if I don't go and try, I'll just be sitting in my cushy job and enjoying all these benefits. If I try, my best case scenario is I can go and be a billionaire or make a couple $1 million, whatever it may be. So, and then if it doesn't work, I'll just come back to the job I'm at right now, right? And for me, like, to be quite honest, in the situation I'm in, I sort of was trying to mitigate risk. So I said, okay, where's the place that most entrepreneurs go, who go and start businesses? And one thing that I've read quite often is, people go to Stanford, Harvard, schools like this. So my thing was like, okay, I'm going to go to Stanford, which I'm at right now. And I said, I'm going to work on my business. I'm going to try and network, meet VCs, meet potential people who work with me. And for me, my worst case scenario is like, okay, if this doesn't work and I don't get my business funded, I'm going to leave with a Stanford degree. It's not the worst situation in the world, honestly. It actually makes me more valuable in some sort of ways. And so, yeah, internal conflict, that's the one for me. Now, in terms of the latter part of the question, like the external conflict, I think the thing that's been most challenging for me is dealing with other people and their personalities. This could be both customers or it could be people that we're hiring on. Because I think at the end of the day, a lot of times, especially in technology, I think that there is an we overly think about numbers a lot, right? It's like X number, does it do this, blah, blah. But a lot of times what business is about is actually about people, whether it be the people that you serve, our customers, or whether it be the people internally. And people have emotions. They don't act pragmatically a lot of times. They act because of unbeknown reasons to you. They have different motives that you may be unaware of. And so sometimes you could say, hey, I've treated you with kindness and I said this and I thought this, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, the thing that you said or the thing you did, I perceived totally differently. So that's been very interesting to me, is just kind of getting to understand all these various perspectives. And then I think the other thing in terms of dealing with other people that's been difficult at times, and it actually kind of goes to my former point I made about rejection as a myth, is really getting rejection. Because at the end of the day, one thing about entrepreneurship that makes it really difficult is that you're constantly going out there and you're evangelizing, you're proselytizing about your business, and you're telling VCs about it, you're telling customers about it, you're telling anyone who will listen to you about it. And a lot of times, especially with VCs, they say no. Right. And so going back to one of the things I said very early in the podcast about making sure to decipher that your business is not a reflection of yourself, is like when someone tells you no, it's not that they're saying you're a bad person or I don't like you or whatever it may be. They're just like, hey, this specific opportunity I'm not interested in. You may be a great person, but because of X, Y, and Z reason, I'm not investing. And so that is a part of essentially being an entrepreneur that's been really difficult, which is dealing with people saying no. But at the same time, it's actually made me more resilient in a lot of ways.
Wow, that's such a very robust response. And that brings me to my next question, because it looks like you had some decent, opportunities to get funds. And one challenge many creatives, potential creatives who never become creative have, is that they say they lack funding, they say they lack capital, they say they lack access to cash flow. So what would you say to these people, and what would you have done differently if you hadn't had the cash flow you had to bootstrap your business?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. One thing that's come up a few times as I've talked to professors about my business and what I'm trying to do, I talk about VCs. One thing that they remind me of, and I think it's a lot easier when you're outside of the situation to think things like this, but they always say, VC is some of the most expensive type of money you can get, right? Because if you go to a VC, then they take some of your business, they are able to make some decisions and influence some decisions, these types of things. Whereas, if you, and a lot of people do this, they come up with a business, and I would say, I don't know the exact number, but I'm sure it's 99% of American businesses, there's no VCs involved, right? And very successful businesses. It could be the barbershop down the street, it could be a technology business, no matter what it may be. Very few people have access to VC money, but end up making a lot of money. So I'd say maybe one, keep that in mind. VC money is, and again, this kind of goes back to one of the points I made before about, always hear about like Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and all these things. You always hear about VCs and people getting money from VCs because it's so rare, because it happens so infrequently that it's actually newsworthy when people get money from them, right? Or they get this type of money. So back to your original question, like what would I do differently? I think the thing that I'm actually now doing, right, is like looking more so into grants, right? This is cheap money because you don't have to, if you can get a grant, whether it could be from, the US government has a lot of grants, research grants, et cetera, things that the US government's trying to do. It's free money. They're like, look, you have this idea. This is something that we want people to research. We can't do it ourselves at the IRS or DOD or State Department, whatever it may be, but we'll give people money like you to do things like this, right? So that's a way of getting free money. Another way is obviously to make money yourself. And so for me, that's what I did, right? I had talked before about having a great and cushy job. I said, in order for me to strike out on my own as an entrepreneur, I need to make sure I have some sort of safety net. Some people, their safety net is provided to them by rich family members or growing up in a situation where they can fail and really not bad things are going to happen because their parents or some rich uncle is going to have their back. But for me, I didn't necessarily have that. So I said, instead of having a rich uncle, I need to just sort of become rich myself. And so I decided that, okay, I'll make money, save some money, and then I'll use that for the couple of years that I won't be working. So that's another way of doing it. So as we kind of say in Texas, right, there's multiple ways to skin a cat. You don't only have to get VC money. You can make money for yourself. You can go get grants, or you can essentially, and this is the thing that is probably the best way of doing it, is make a business that's actually profitable and makes its own money from the get-go, right? Sell a service from the very beginning. This is something I think, especially in Silicon Valley, that gets lost, is the fact that there are a lot of businesses out there that people are willing to pay for. And so if you say to yourself, hey, I don't have VC money, say to yourself, what is something I can sell today that people are willing to pay for from day one and I don't have to give away for free? And so that allows you to have a profitable business and to make a living.
Wow, that's awesome. And to your point, there are also people who had VC money who failed, right? You've seen people who got investors pumping tens of millions of dollars into their business and the business still failed. So having money is not a guarantee, or having cash injection into your business idea is not a guarantee that it will succeed, right? And that's why the primary thing I recommend for potential entrepreneurs and professionals to have dialed in is to have their creativity fired up. Because when you have your creativity working, when you're manifesting your creativity as you go in that your journey, you will be able to figure out ways to solve problem optimally in a way that would cause your business to thrive and help you succeed. Having said that, my next question would be, how did you come up with a solution model? Like you knew you had a problem, a personal problem, and you wanted to solve it. I'm asking you this question because there are people out there who have identified a pain in the environment or in the world or in the market, as we fondly call it, and they want to create a solution for that pain. What would be your recommendation for such people? If you have a framework, I believe you do because you've already walked the walk. So can you talk us into that framework that you would recommend?
Yeah, so the thing I would recommend is one thing that they teach in the D school is what we call, but design school at Stanford University is design thinking. I think that when people think about design traditionally, they think about sculptures and architecture and like some sort of art and things like that, which are all generally actually parts of design. It's not like they're not. But one of the things that differentiates Stanford in terms of design and the program and the way it works is it's more about systems design, like how do we change a system? So when I talk about a system, a good system would be maybe how do we change voting in America and elections and making sure that people are able to get out who can vote and make sure that they're also educated. How do we change that whole system so that when you go to vote, the line isn't 3 hours and you can take 5 minutes during your lunch break, go and get the voting done and then go back to lunch, right? Because most people, they only have 30 minutes, maybe even an hour just go to lunch. Or designing a system being the fact that if you had polluted waters, like what can we do solution wise, what we can design solution wise, which will make it so that the water in Flint, Michigan doesn't get set on fire if you put a lighter to it, right? And so these are different ways of thinking about design. But the reason why I talk about designs and I talk about systems is because when we talk about design in that way, and we talk about design thinking in that way, what we're talking about is problem solving and coming up with a framework for problem solving. So in some of the things that they sort of educated us in, not sort of, but they have been educating us in at Stanford in terms of design thinking in the D school, is just the fact that you can come up with a framework for thinking about any sort of system or any sort of problem and designing a way or designing your way into finding a solution. And so I would say those who have never heard of it, look into design thinking or think about the D school at Stanford University and some of the things that we offer online. And in terms of that, maybe just a few things to sort of give as examples. One of the things that's harped on quite often is just rapid prototyping. So finding, okay, there's some sort of problem that I'm looking at. What different prototypes can I come up with for solutions? And the emphasis here is on different and on rapid prototyping, or rapid, the word rapid. Because the thing that happens actually quite a lot with human beings, which is unfortunate at times, is we generally fall in love with the first solution we think of, right? So you're thinking, okay, there's this problem. What solution do I have? The very first solution that comes into your mind, you go down that path and you never look back. And so like being able to think, okay, what are 3 different types of solutions, kind of iterating through them, seeing the pros and cons, et cetera. And then from that 3, 5, whatever it is that you come up with, figuring out that this is a solution that may work for me, that's part of the framework. Then another part of the framework, which is definitely emphasized within the sort of design thinking, is going out and talking to actual people, right? Because one thing there's a student at Stanford I was talking to, and she's Nigerian, and I remember her saying this to me. She's like, I came to America, and every time I talk to Americans, they think they know everything about the Nigerian experience in America. And it's like their experience as a first generation American with Nigerian parents is different from the experience of someone who's come straight from Nigeria to the United States, which is different from the experience of someone who's maybe 2 generations removed, or the person who went from Nigeria to the UK to the United States, right? So when you say, hey, I'm speaking for the Nigerian experience in the United States, usually not. Like you're speaking for a set of that experience, right? Yeah. Because even within your group, where you did you come from a certain tribe, right? There's various tribes in Nigeria which have various different experiences. Did you come from a certain socioeconomic background, whether in Nigeria, whether in the United States, right? That changes your experience. And so the idea here is that you, as someone saying, I'm speaking for the Nigerian American experience, you should probably talk to a lot of other Nigerians, because once you even talk to other Nigerians, you realize, oh, wait, maybe my experience, it does overlap in some ways, but it's very different in a lot of other ways. So you need to have more context and more knowledge. And then if you broaden that, right, because a lot of times we're not even just talking about the Nigerian American experience, they're talking about the Black experience. And like, well, the Black experience of someone who has Nigerian parents is different from the Black experience from someone whose grandparents, parents, et cetera, were in Alabama the entire time, right? Or whatever it may be. And so going out, talking to people, doing interviewing, and then again, kind of back to the example I'm using, not trying to basically force your opinion on your interviewees, but actually like hearing their experience and then also reading into their experience and learning about their specific experience and taking that and integrating that into your your methodology and your research is a really big part of coming up with this framework. So again, once you've rapidly prototyped, once you've thought of a problem, once you've thought about a solution, once you've done some interviewing, then there's actually time next as part of the framework to go and synthesize. So this is about collecting all the information, thinking about it, and then coming up with possible solutions, or figuring out maybe the problem isn't initially what you thought it was. Maybe it's actually something different now that you talk to people. So these are all part of the framework. But this is sure to wrap it up. I say simple framework, look into design thinking, and think about it.
Wow, that's such an elegant response. Now, you've spoken to how to create a solution for a problem, basically. Can you now speak to how to create a profitable solution? Because it's one thing to have a solution, it's an entirely different thing to have a profitable solution. And that's one thing I believe I want the person listening to us on the other side should get out after this conversation, to be able to leave this conversation with something that can help them iterate on getting a profitable solution from a problem they've spotted that they feel called to answer to. So do you want to say something to that?
Yes. So I would say a simple equation, simple algebra: x minus y equals z. X is revenue, Y is cost, Z is, I would say, profit. And so you want to make sure that X and Z, which are your revenue and your profit, are both positive numbers. Really, and with an emphasis on Z being a profitable number. So I think it really just kind of starts there, right? It starts with the basics. It's like, can I sell something for more than I pay for the cost of goods sold, or for the costs, I should say, right? And trying to think to yourself, and this is a thing, I think a lot of people, they underestimate why, they underestimate the costs. They just say, hey, we could sell this thing and then we can make X million or X $1,000. But then when you really start going down the path of like, okay, maybe I need to get myself an office, maybe I need to pay myself, now I have to get supplies, etc. You start to realize maybe it's not as profitable as you thought. So simple math there, like really sit down, look at the math, see if it's worthwhile. Because a lot of times also, if you see that there's a really big opportunity and no one's realizing the profits there, it's most likely not as profitable as you think. And that's why a lot of people aren't doing it. But if you do actually find, and it's not that there's none out there, you find something that which is highly profitable and no one's doing it, then you've got a really, really good business. And I think that essentially finding that, or answering your question more directly, is finding those places in which no one is really looking, but X is so unbelievably large that no matter what you do, Z is going to be a positive number. And really, I think this goes back to sort of like the design thinking exercise. It's like you've identified a problem, and then now you start looking through for the solution, and you use your design thinking framework. But as part of that framework, you need to realize and you need to figure out what Y is going to be. And if you think to yourself, hey, I think Y or the costs are going to outstrip X as I go through this journey, then maybe say to yourself, is it really worth going down that path, right? And I think, yeah, it's generally as simple as that. I don't think it's really that much more difficult. It's kind of like, sometimes I go around and people ask me like, hey, you look pretty big. Like, what do you do when you work out? And I generally just say to them, I go to the gym. It's the first step. Like it's like a lot of stuff like that is like very simple. It's like, well, if you want to be fitter, like you have to go to the gym or you have to run or whatever it may be. And I think what's really interesting sometimes about humans is they don't get past that first step. It's like, in order to achieve this, you have to do the first simple step, right? And the first simple step in the business context is, make sure you have something with revenue.
Yeah, and most times people want to hear something complicated even when it's simple, because people think creativity is complexity, and I always try to help them understand that creativity is simplicity at best, right? And even when you see a complex solution at the end of the day, it came by iterating simple things layer upon layer, right? And what you said is pretty, profound, because Myron Golden usually says all the knowledge you need to be a millionaire was taught to you on your third grade, right? Simple mathematics, one times X number equal this number, Z number, right? If you are able to do that basic mathematics that any third grade student can do, and then you just replace those variables with what you're selling and what you're bringing to the market, I believe that anyone can be profitable, and you can make your solution a profitable solution. And sometimes people have great solutions, but they just have the numbers wrong, and just tweaking those can make a difference for them. So thank you so much for giving us that breakdown. I believe that this is a good place to bring our discussion to a close. I don't know if you have any final thoughts before we wrap it up today. Anything you would like to say or share for the person listening to us on the other side?
Yeah, the last thing I'll sort of say is that entrepreneurship is really difficult, but I think one of the marquee sort of attributes of any entrepreneur is going out and executing. This goes back to what I said more recently about profit, about working out, whatever it may be. It's just the fact that if you want to be successful, it's not being able to run 10 miles on the first day. It's about running 100 meters, then 200 meters, then 300, then 400, day after day, and then building up to this. And I think a lot of times the thing with human beings is that we're very good at seeing short-term things, but we're very hard with long-term planning. That's why there's a lot of people, their 401ks aren't where they want to be, or they don't have retirement, or they find themselves at a certain age and they're not in a job that they want to be. It's because in order to get to the ultimate end goal, you have to be doing small things every day, and people sort of miss that. I think the industry to look at that does this quite well, and those who know this in the industry do quite well, is understanding small things like compounding interest. Something compounding at 1% day over day. It sounds like nothing, but over the course of a year, I don't quite know the numbers off the top of my head, but I'm sure if you had compounding 1% interest on like maybe $100 or $1,000, it'd probably be like $1 million by the end of the year, right? So it's like understanding that like these small steps like really compound over time. And like a good example I would say of this is if anyone, and God bless him, Kobe Bryant, listen to any of his motivation stuff. He talks about this quite a bit, where he talks about waking up at 4 a.m., going to the gym, then going to eat, and then going back to the gym. And his thing was like, look, if I get up early every day and I work out twice a day, and everyone's only working out once, then I can get better in half the time as everyone else. And so really just these small habits building up day after day. And if as for him, obviously became a great NBA player, but if you work out twice a day for 10 years in a row, whatever it may be, it's shocking the amount of growth and the amount of success that you can have. So think about time like that.
Profound. That's so profound. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the powerful responses. I believe those who are listening to us on the other side have already received some golden nuggets that they can run with. And so for you listening to me on the other side, I want to say thank you for listening to us today. I believe you found some value in our conversation. Why don't you tell someone about it? Why don't you tell a friend, a family, a spouse, a loved one about what you heard today about how to create profitable solutions for a problem, and let them know that they can do it. And that's what we basically do here at Creativity Boost, to help potential creatives become actually creative by going from idea to profitable creations. Once again, thank you, Gatsby, for joining us on the show. Thank you so much for everything that you said. I believe that this has been such a profound conversation. I look forward to probably having such a conversation sometime in the future again. But till then, have a good one, everyone, and see you in our next episode.